Today, what we want to do is give just an overview of the work of the FSF campaigns team, what we spend all of our time doing, because we know that a lot of people in the audience will be familiar with the technical aspects of free software and the GNU Linux operating system, but they might not know what the Free Software Foundation really does or how long we've been around or things like that. So really our goal today is to give an overview of all the aspects of our work, especially the work of the campaigns team, and then let everybody know how they can get involved. So we're really excited to be here. And then this is pre-recorded, obviously, but I'll be sticking around for questions a little bit later. So if you have any, just feel free to shout out. And this is just an outline of the general stuff we plan to go over today. So I'm gonna start off with an introduction. You know, if you've never heard of the FSF before, that's okay. We're gonna talk a little bit about free software. A lot of the conference presentations today will use the term open source. We prefer the term free software for reasons we'll get into a little later. We'll focus on some campaigns team initiatives, give you some encouragement on how you can live a fully free software life in the digital world, and then how you can get involved both with the FSF community and the FSF in general. So let's get going. So what's free software and what's the FSF? Well, our mission statement, you can see this at the top of our website, which is where I got it from. The Free Software Foundation is a nonprofit with a worldwide mission to promote computer user freedom. And that can mean a lot of things. Obviously, that's a very broad mission statement, but in practice, this means educating the public about free software and the dangers of proprietary software. And one thing that the FSF is known for, famously and infamously, is that we do all of our work with free software. Everything, all of our laptops are about 11 years old because they run a free BIOS, and free software even powers our office phones. So we're very committed to using fully free software to do our work, which I think gives us a pretty distinctive perspective when it comes to encouraging other people to go 100% when it comes to software freedom.
I'm going to introduce you a little bit into what we do here at the FSF. We are split up mostly in 3 teams, the campaigns team, the licensing team, and the FSF tech team. The licensing team, as it says right here, is the steward of the GNU General Public License and defends copyright on the GNU project. The licensing team does compliance management. They also have an organization called RYF, Respect Your Freedom, in which they certify hardware products to make sure that they are free. And they hold a seminar annually, which is a CLE seminar on copyleft and legal ethics, just to help educate law professionals and licensing advocates to know sort of what is the latest when it comes to copyleft and licensing regulations. We then also have a tech team. The tech team is 4 people strong, and they maintain and provide the infrastructure for the GNU project and a few other fully free software projects. They build and maintain our servers. They maintain the mailing lists and help other developers and answer a bunch of questions when it comes to technical free software stuff. Then there is the campaigns team, of which Greg and I are a part. Our third member is Dana Morgenstein. The campaigns team basically advocates for free software and pushes against proprietary software. So we produce educational materials, we organize protests, petitions, we do the International Day Against DRM. Greg will tell you a little bit later about that. We also host Libra Planet, which is our annual conference on free software issues and technology, which I will tell you a little bit later about as well. Generally, we make sure that we spread awareness, organize events, and educate people on what free software is and how they can help spread that message.
Yep. So a lot of people, you know, we're throwing around the term free software, but just in case there are people in the audience who may not know exactly what that term entails and maybe how it is distinct from the concept of open source, We provided the free software definition here, and any program is free software, provided it gives its users 4 basic freedoms. So freedom 0, because a lot of things in the computer world start with 0. The freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose. So a lot of EULAs, for end user license agreements for proprietary software, they'll actually discriminate against fields of endeavor. So famously, the iTunes EULA will say that you can't use iTunes in a nuclear testing facility, just in case, you know, that bloated piece of garbage sets off a bomb or something. So that would be pretty bad. But in contradistinction to that, free software allows you to use the program for any purpose that you want, and also allows any person to use it. Some proprietary software will also discriminate against people based on where they live, for example, or, you know, certain beliefs they have. There are really all kinds of things you can find of EULAs if you actually take the time to read them. But freedom 1, that follows freedom 0, is the freedom to study the program, how the program works, and to change it if you want. So this will obviously require the source code to the program, because if you're just looking at binary code, it's not really very fun, and it's not really easy to tell the actual functionality of the program. Freedom 2 is the freedom to redistribute copies so you can help others. So, you know, if I have a copy of a really cool free software program I like, I can send it to Zoe without fear of somebody breathing down my neck saying that it was wrong for me to share with my neighbor. So freedom 2 is a very important freedom when it comes to democratizing the access of free software. It doesn't mean that you can't sell it. It just means that anyone is free to copy it and share it with a friend if they want. And then the final freedom, freedom 3, is the freedom to redistribute copies of your modified version. So if I take, you know, a cool free software program and I change it a little bit, maybe change the name to like Greg's cool software program and like add a function or something, freedom 3 would give me the freedom to distribute copies of my modified version to others with the same kind of ability that freedom 2 would grant me. And in practice, open source and free software, they refer to the same programs, but free software is a term that we use because it puts the emphasis solely on user freedom. The FSF is a technological social justice organization, and since we view proprietary software as fundamentally unjust, we want to keep our language always grounded and always focused on freedom. And open source is a kind of technologically neutral term. If you look at the history, you'll see that open source was coined to actually avoid certain political connotations with the term free software. We're not afraid of those political connotations, and in fact, we embrace them, and because we think that all computer users deserve freedom. So that's just a basic rundown of the free software definition in case you're unfamiliar.
Then a brief history on the Gnu project. So the Gnu project was started in 1985 by Richard Stallman with the goal of writing an operating system that was fully free software. For those of you interested and have not read about this yet, Richard Stallman has published his story on how he ran into difficulties with a printer at some point, which prompted him to start working against proprietary software, which sort of came up around that time. He started with some simpler projects, and then by 1991, most of the GNU system was complete, but it didn't have a kernel yet. And so when Linux came out, that was a perfect combination. So when combined with GNU, GNU Linux became the operating system that we all now know and still use, and is fully free software, and something that has developed and sort of became the core of what pushed free software forward. GNU is still developing, still going strong as well. Packages are still being created and collected, and this is something that you can also see through our website. You can see that I think there are about 16,000 packages right now, maybe even more. And there are some projects that are still going really strong and doing progressive and important things. So one of them, for example, is GNU Geeks, a reproducible package manager, and then there's GNU Tailor, which is a free software payment system. And then, of course, there is GNU Emacs, which is one of Greg's favorites. and they wrote this presentation with it.
So a lot of the time, everybody's using free software. You know, if you use GNU Linux, you're using free software, but you're likely not using 100% free software or fully free software. And this is pretty important because, as I mentioned before, you know, the FSF considers proprietary software to be a social injustice. So really, if there's a single proprietary component left in your, you know, software distribution or left that you're dependent on in your laptop, for example, you're being oppressed, right? Literally. And so we recommend the use of fully free distributions of GNU Linux. There's a list of these on gnu.org. Triskel is the main one that we use at the FSF for all of our office computers. It's actually headed by our CTO, Ruben Rodriguez. So we're big fans of that. But, you know, often the matter of like choosing a fully free software distribution, it can be kind of technically difficult, which is why the FSF started the Respects Your Freedom initiative. And that's a way for manufacturers to certify that their hardware runs fully free software. So if a laptop was certified and it got the RYF certification, that would mean that that laptop entirely runs on free software down to the BIOS level. And often, you know, it's people say like, well, what's the point? Like, what's the point of having 100% free software? And there are so many places where that can really kind of come to be important, right? Because if you're using like a proprietary network driver for your wireless card, which is often the case in GNU Linux, like who's to say that there's not some kind of malicious function that a, you know, 3-letter security agency could use to you know, intercept your communications or anything like that. And at the same time, you know, a free BIOS is important because the UEFI BIOS in most laptops, you know, that's 6 million lines of code. That's like an enormous attack vector for one thing. But more crucially, you know, that's like a giant piece of your computer that is not directly under your control. So we always emphasize the need to run fully free software.
On advocacy and community then a bit, one of the chief ways that the FSF team, our team of Greg, myself, and Dana promote free software is through writing and doing local advocacy efforts. We try and include the community and have a big voice that can be heard all over the world. This can be a challenge, of course, sometimes. We need to make sure that we explain the concepts of free software to people that do understand it, have a technical background, but also sometimes to people that don't understand it as much, and that we want to sort of include in our story as well, because if anything, we need to be welcoming to make sure that we have a big crowd of people to be able to advocate for free software in the future as well. So at FSF.org, we're regularly commenting on how recent events impact our computer user freedom and how organizations like Google, Apple, or Microsoft put them at risk, and how, for example, sometimes the way politics or society is responding to the different kind of power that they have, those large corporations and organizations should be seen through the window of if only we would be working with free software, then a lot of the situations that we find ourselves in daily where our user freedoms are being encroached wouldn't happen as much. So we try and jump on top of recent events and communicate about that and help see people where the injustices lie as much as possible and as much as we can within our small team. We are also the FSF's main point of connection with the global free software community, and we do our best to stay involved in discussions on how technology can empower us and deprive them of their freedom. We host a forum on our website for our associate members, where we communicate with community members and learn from them sort of what the issues are that are on their minds. And there are also GNU email lists that help us, where we see community members communicate about different issues that are happening in the world, and that we can jump on as well. We're always looking for members of the community to help us work with this. So if you are already an associate member, please jump on the forum and share your voice. We are not always communicating there, but we are always following what's happening. As well as the Libra Planet Discuss email list has the same effect. We don't always communicate or add to the conversation there, but we do definitely follow and find it unbelievably interesting and important to read and hear what people have to say. And then there is our Working Together for Free Software project, which is something that we do on our fsf.org website, where this is a bit twofold. So on the one hand, the FSF is the financial steward for some other organizations that are important for the future of free software and that are doing important things. And you can see through our website which organizations they are. And if you want to support those organizations, you can do that through the FSF, and we will make sure that they get the support that you give. And then the other side of that is really the more community-focused side of it, in which we try and talk to and listen to community members and have you publish on our website what is free software and why it's important to you, or for example, how you encounter working with free software or having to deal with proprietary software at your work and how you deal with those things. And we feel that those things are very important. There's often question, for example, about whether or not you can earn any money doing free software. And if you are not a technical person, what can you do to still build your career in this world, fighting for user freedom? And questions like that can really be answered by us or by anyone that you know, but it's a sort of homecoming feeling when you can find on a website a story written by someone that you know is successful, you respect, and sort of it helps you find out how they got to where they are. So when you have a moment, dive into that, read about it. There's some really interesting people on there.
Yeah, for sure. And we understand that if maybe a few of these have been played as bumpers in the OLF schedule, but just in case they weren't, we've lately been making animated videos to explain free software concepts. The first of these was Shoe Tool, which we debuted last year. It's kind of holiday themed and kind of paints the picture of an elf who doesn't have control over his hardware, and that kind of ends up being pretty bad for him. More recently, we did the University of Costumed Heroes, which was a warning about the dangers of proprietary remote education when implemented in a university of superheroes. Can go pretty dangerously wrong. And then I think last month we developed Rewind, which is a video to teach others about the positive impact free software can have on the scientific community. It covers a scientist who's researching a cure for a disease, and it shows the positive impact that free software could have, but then it kind of rewinds, hence the title, and shows what would happen if she didn't have access to free software, if instead the program she was using was proprietary. And we think that that's a pretty good video, so we hope that you'll check them out if you haven't already.
Can I add to that a little bit, Greg?
Yeah, sure.
What we have issues with sometimes within the FSF is that free software is something that sort of stretches out over a lot of different aspects of life. It's not just about software. It affects us in many, many different ways. And what we're trying to do with these videos is really sort of make sure that we explain all these different angles, and that when people that don't really know the concepts of free software, or even if you do, you run into these issues in daily life, and there's sort of a moment of recognizing that this is something that could be different or should be different, and that your freedoms are really sort of being abused in that sense. And so what we're trying to do is really highlight all of these different angles. And Shoe Tool, for example, really focuses on DRM and user lock-in. In that sense, and the University of Costumed Heroes, as it says here, is about remote education, but it's also really about sort of backdoors into your machines, and you not having full control over the machines or the technology that you use, and how that can be abused and how that's dangerous for society, but also for our future. And of course, there's also the aspect of how in education it's important to use free software in general, because when it comes to being a student, what you are being taught is how things work, but you're not allowed to see how the tools that you learn this through work. Actually, Greg will probably talk about this a little bit more later. And of course, in the rewind video, we talked about really the core of the 4 freedoms is when you want to be able to see the software, see the source code, and be able to share it and enhance it, which is something that is how science is moving forward and how society keeps moving forward if we have the right to actually improve on things that already exist. And we can't improve on things that already exist if we can't see what it's made of.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the major campaigns that the FSF runs is the Defective by Design campaign, which is our campaign against digital restrictions management, commonly known as DRM. And the reason for the Defective by Design title is that, you know, if you think about how DRM works and how it's used, they're really creating a product that is by intention defective by design, right? So like, who would think to make an ebook that you can't share with a friend, for example? You can share any normal file with a friend. So by, you know, putting something in the ebook that you download that prevents it from being transferred, they're intentionally making some kind of faulty product or faulty file or item. And this is an injustice in itself, but often in the way DRM is implemented, it becomes a grave threat to computer user freedom because it also relies on proprietary backdoors to function. This can be in software and it can also be in hardware. So with the Widevine DRM that is behind Netflix and a lot of other video streaming sites, there are multiple levels of multiple levels of a stranglehold, right, that the company has on you. So at the lowest level, there's software, but actually increasingly, and this is a big problem for free software, is DRM is being implemented on the hardware level. So, you know, it just bypasses straight through the OS and then runs on a chip that neither us or anyone else has an idea of what it's really doing. So you can see where this would be a big problem for free software and any free software activists, because if we insist on having 100% free software components in the systems that we use, having this malicious chip, you know, that's running this entirely different set of instructions just to prevent you from doing something you should be able to do anyway, it becomes a pretty big deal pretty fast. So each year we also sponsor through Defective by Design an annual day of protest against DRM called IDAD, and this year's is on December 4th. This is the 14th that we've done, I think. So we're excited to be having that. It's going to be targeting Netflix this year, just because in times of the quarantine, people have been increasingly dependent on streaming services to get their entertainment, which is totally normal. But when they also subjecting themselves to DRM, that's a problem, right? It's a problem for the user because they're being oppressed. It's not, you know, we're not attacking the people who are actually watching this stuff. We're going after the corporations that insist on using DRM to lock down their media. And you can learn more about the Defective by Design campaign at defectivebydesign.org. And then the Day Against DRM's specific website is dayagainstdrm.org.
Then we also have a program called Email Self-Defense, and that has its own website. You can see that at the bottom of that slide, which is emailselfdefense.fsf.org. And that is about bulk surveillance mostly and encryption. So because bulk surveillance really violates our fundamental rights and makes it risky for us to practice free speech, we want to make sure that people are skilled or have the skills and the knowledge to defend themselves against this. And one of the most important things is that sometimes people say that they don't need this protection because they don't do anything that requires for them to protect themselves. But the idea is that there are actually people in this world that do need protection, whether it is from governments or whether it is from oppressive systems or societal issues that they run into, or even in their personal lives. And a lot of people don't have the freedoms that we have. And to be able to also support those people, we also need to use encryption. And that, I think, is an argument that people often don't grasp when it comes to why encryption is important. We use encryption to protect ourselves, but also to protect others. And email self-defense is really our way of educating people into what they can do to protect themselves and others to do that. So it's really a step-by-step guide to help you set up encryption in your email. It helps you create a key no matter what operating system you run, and we have a bot in the system that can communicate with you whether or not your key is actually working. So have a look at it and install it. It's really easy. It's really a step-by-step thing. And if you run into any issues, you can always email us as well. But we've been running this guide for a while now, and there's a lot of people that have used it before you. So we've made a lot of adaptations to make it as simple as possible so that anyone of any skill level can go through it and really sort of set this up for themselves and or their family members. Like I said, if you run into any issues or if you see any issues with the guide, then you can always email us. You can also help us by translating this guide. So it currently has, I think, about 14 translations already. You can look at the translations, check those and work on those, but you can also start an entirely new translation for the country that you're in. And that way you can help us spread this even further.
Yeah, and just to add on that, one or two things. Something we often hear when we talk about encryption is like, well, why should I use encryption if I have nothing to hide, right? I have nothing to hide. But if you think about it, like our goal with ESD in particular and why we encourage encryption as much as possible is that we want to just normalize the practice because, if everyone was using encryption, it would kind of increase the protection of the people who really need encryption, right? Because then it would be normalized and those people wouldn't be singled out for using encryption, right? As all this data is passing through the wires, it's intercepted by the NSA and others. And when they see an encrypted communication, that's kind of cause for suspicion on their part, and if it were more normalized, maybe it wouldn't be. So it's always important to use not only email encryption, but hard drive encryption if you're able to, just because it normalizes the practice and actually does, quite a lot to defend the kind of rights of the people who do really need it, journalists, whistleblowers, people of all types. So if you haven't set up a GPG key pair yet, we encourage you to try it. Maybe even email one of us if it's set up. So ESD is a great resource, I think, because people, you don't have to be especially technical. So we hope you'll check it out.
Yeah, and last, even on that, is that even if you do have nothing to hide, no one still has a right or a place in your communication. So
right.
If protecting others is not a reason enough, which I think it should be, then also just think about just the fact that you have to protect your communication alone. And if you just ponder on that a little bit, I think encryption becomes a very sort of logical idea.
Yeah, definitely. So one campaign that we also do is the free JavaScript campaign, because actually most pages on the internet now require the use of non-free software to even function. So if you go to Google Docs, you'll end up downloading like a 50 megabyte JavaScript library, and this is proprietary JavaScript, because even though at any time you can like right-click and view the source of the website that you're on, often the JavaScript that you read is all in like one gigantically long line that's like millions of characters long, and not only that, but it's obfuscated, right? So they'll run it through an obfuscator to hide what the program is doing, and these have gotten so good that there's really no meaningful difference between this obfuscated JavaScript code and binary. So as everything kind of moves to the browser, we run the risk of people like using a free operating system like GNU Linux, but then when they open up their web browser, they're dependent on proprietary software, and that's a real problem. Because we don't want the web browser to become like the number one way that people experience proprietary software, right? It's such a kind of ubiquitous part of the web now that we really want to get average users and also website developers interested in freeing their JavaScript. And there's also like a lot of free software libraries, JavaScript libraries that are in use today. And to those, we would encourage them to label their JavaScript libraries properly, so that they can be machine read and then easily kind of filtered out for users who are concerned about their freedom. So we encourage site owners to release their JavaScript under a free license. And the Free JS campaign also promotes the use of Libra Js. So Libra Js is a little bit like NoScript if you've ever used that, except it will read the JavaScript source of every website that you visit and then it'll look for certain headers. And if it sees this header, it'll say, oh, I know this is under a free license, so I'll run this piece of JavaScript. But I see that this one doesn't have a license, and it's not trivial. If JavaScript is only there to like collapse a menu or something, we think of it as trivial, and so it's kind of less crucial that becomes free software because it's just a one-line piece of code or something. But the Libra Js will do all this work for you, because otherwise you would have to just kind of go through every source file and see for yourself. And it's gotten a lot faster lately if you've used it before. So we definitely encourage you to check it out. And if you're interested in helping us out with labeling your own JavaScript, you can go to the FSF.org page on free JavaScript. And the same information is also available on Gnu.org if you search for the JavaScript trap, which is RMS's original essay on this a number of years ago.
Lima Planet. Lima Planet is our annual conference on technology and social justice. We are in our 13th edition this year. Last year we had a fully online event. It is a conference in which we have about 40 to 45 speakers every year talking about their fields of knowledge in the range of whatever touches upon free software. And so those are people that either are organizers or community members, or they are developers and they have their own projects. And those people share their knowledge and their interest. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Libra Planet 2020 was held online last year in March. And because we don't know what the future will bring, but we want to be safe and make sure that our audience is safe as well, we have decided that Libra Planet 2021 will also be held online in March next year. So we are currently in preparations of that, and our call for speakers is open right now, and you can still submit your presentation for this year's conference at libraplanet.org/2021. And the theme for this year is empowering users. What we saw in the pandemic is that a lot of people got together and started working on solutions, whether it was sewing their own masks or other PPE, whether it was developing faster on video conferencing possibilities, or even if it was just about sharing information. Our libraplanet.org website is a network where a lot of people can come together. And on that, we also had a remote communication site that just became bigger and bigger and bigger, which was an amazing thing to see, where the community added information on tools that you can use that are actually respectful of your freedom that you can use in having to live and work remotely. Things like that, as well as people really using their expertise and sharing their expertise in different fields to find ways to go against the pandemic or protect themselves from the pandemic or educate people was really something that inspired us. And from there, we really thought to ourselves, what is it that brings that is like at the core of free software right now? And that is really this empowering users, is having for users to have and take the power to stand up for themselves and protect their rights and really get things done, because that's really what they did over the past year. And that was amazing to see. And we want to hear from you. If you have anything to say, whether it is pandemic related or not, free software is really all about taking the power into your own hands and developing on that. And we want to hear your story if you have something to say.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, high priority projects. That's also me. Sorry. So we got together a committee of free software luminaries. The campaigns team manages the high priority free software projects list, but we do not own it, and we do not make the final decisions when it comes to what is added and what is not added. There are currently a range of projects that are already on the list, and the list was last updated, I think, somewhere in 2017. And examples of what is on there is free CAPTCHA tools or free video conferencing platforms, decentralized social media, and things like that. It's really about what we feel or what the community feels that free software organizations and developers and also funders or donors should focus on when they invest into pushing free software forward. And we have opened the call for submissions, and we really want to hear from everyone. Please email hppfeedback@gnu.org and let us know what you think is important for people to focus on and what should be the things that we highlight when it comes to projects that can really sort of define the future of free software. We are running the submissions until January. You can still submit after that. It's just that our committee at some point has to start reviewing everything that comes in, and they will do this in January and February. And then the idea is to launch a new list and have a presentation at Libra Planet 2021 in March of next year.
Right. Yeah. Just to add to that real quick, I mean, the high priority projects list, if you're, a very talented programmer or something, it kind of exists to say, like, if, say, person A, who's a very talented programmer, really gets interested in free software and they want to help out, lending their development skills, they could look at the high priority projects list to say, like, okay, like, where is free software really badly needed? And the list would be there to provide them suggestions on what to develop and what to assist with. So it's really just a way of kind of taking a litmus test of the free software movement, because we know that we've come so far. We know that people can use their computer without using proprietary software at all, but there are some aspects of life where they're definitely still experiencing pressure to use proprietary software. We get it at the FSF every day. If we're working with another organization and they want us to, like, electronically sign a document or something, we can't do it because it requires non-free JavaScript. So there are really a lot of aspects like this, and it isn't hard to think of them if you think really carefully. Just because if you're using any kind of tool that you don't know of a proprietary or of a free solution for, then you can send it to HPP feedback because maybe it'd be a good candidate for the list. And something else the FSF also does at Libra Planet is give out the free software awards. We've been doing this, I think, since before there was a Libra Planet, but it's our way of recognizing individuals and also free software projects who have done something significant for the free software community, or alternatively have applied the principles of the free software community to some other field of endeavor, for example, like a hospital that runs on free software or something like that. And the three categories are the award for the advancement of free software. So this one is a kind of technological award. So if there's a particular person who is, pioneered a project that is given a lot of benefit to everyone in the free software community. Some past winners include Larry Wall, who wrote the Perl programming language, Yukihiro Matsumoto, who wrote the Ruby programming language. So these big kind of watershed programs in the free software movement. That's kind of what the award for the advancement of free software exists to recognize. Next one is the award for projects of social benefit. So this is kind of what I mentioned with the hospital scenario, but it's really a award to recognize people who do some other kind of social good other than fight for free software, but use the principles of free software or use free software programs extensively in their work. So one example was the OpenStreetMaps group, which was awarded 2 years ago because they're kind of democratizing access to map data, which otherwise would be locked behind a restrictive license. And we debuted a new category last year, which is the award for the outstanding new free software contributor. So if there's a person in your free software community or project, it could be like somebody on your distributions forum, or it could be somebody who just got involved with some program that you're involved with or running. And if they really made great strides in the last year or so, hit the ground running in terms of the work that they do, and in terms of just being a kind of good role model for people in the free software movement, both ones that have been around longer than they have and ones that have been around less than they have. We'd really like to hear from them and get your nominations for the award of that category. So the nominations are still open. They're going to be open until November 11th. And if you'd like to nominate someone, just go to fsf.org/awards. The way that it works is we read all the nominations, and then these go to a committee of past award winners who will grant the award. And then they're traditionally given out at Libra Planet in Boston. But since we're going online this year, we'll have a creative way to award people, so don't worry about that.
Mobile phone freedom is actually also a high priority project, if I say this correctly. It was listed on the high priority free software projects list because mobile phone freedom, of course, is one of the major things that should be on our radars when talking about free software. We currently have the opportunity and the possibility to have fully free operating systems or even fully free BIOSes and computers running only free software when it comes to laptops and desktops, but it is not somewhere where we are yet when it comes to the mobile phone. So, of course, we want to move into this field, and we want to develop or help stimulate the development of operating systems and mobile phone freedom. Android is nominally free software, but almost always ships with non-free Google libraries and non-free drivers. We recommend using the replicant distribution of Android to make sure your freedom is protected. So that's one of the projects that we are also is also in our Working Together program. Replicant is an important project that is moving forward, and they've done some really amazing things in the past, and they still are moving quite progressively forward. And I know that they made some big steps last year. We had Dennis also published something through our website on his update. So if you want to read the latest, then that's also on the fsf.org website. I also know that they also update their replicant website with information on where they are and what's developing there and how you can help. So have a look at that. Then, of course, there's Purism. Purism's Librem 5 is very promising and looks very sleek as well, but we haven't had a chance to review it for REF certifications. They have submitted, so we will be looking into that. And we do know that it runs PureOS, which is an FSF-approved distribution of GNU Linux. These are two ways that sort of give us hope, and they are positive developments in the mobile phone fields. But it's definitely something we need to make sure that we keep updating and keep in our radar. And if you have any knowledge or understanding here, then reach out to these projects to see if you can help.
Yeah, definitely. And then if you already have an Android phone, you don't have to be running, a custom ROM or anything to download the F-Droid store, which is a repository of only free software packages for Android. We use it at the FSF for our phones. But yeah, it's just a great way to get started on, using free software, especially on your mobile phone, because if there's a Google app that you use, chances are that there's an F-Droid app that could replace its functionality. I know my personal phone, while it doesn't run fully free software, it does run fully free, has no Google libraries, and it runs fully free applications. So F-Droid really has like a wide range of programs that you can choose from. So if you haven't checked it out, I definitely encourage you to do that. And one thing we also like to encourage, this is another high priority project, or at least from the 2017 list, and is a kind of step that we like to encourage people to take when it comes to living a more freedom-minded digital life, is being discriminate about the social media that they're on and which kind of tools that they use. So here it's important to clarify that network services like Twitter, they're neither free nor non-free, because they're not really being distributed to users as a service. They might be distributing their user software, typically in the form of like a non-free JavaScript page that you use to post on Twitter or something. So this is a slightly separate issue from free software versus non-free software, but we still like to encourage people to use federated social media, because often, the server-side software of programs like Mastodon or PeerTube are free software, and they often kind of align more with freedom-minded ideals than the alternative. So we really encourage these to avoid centralization and corporate surveillance. So just a range of free software. Federated social media platforms we recommend are Mastodon, GNU Social, and Pleroma, which are all compatible with ActivityPub. And we ourselves have been taking some strides in this recently. We signed up for a PeerTube account, which is a federated alternative to YouTube. So the FSF has an account on the Framasoft instance who create PeerTube. And so through our account, we can then reach everyone else on PeerTube, no matter what instance they're on, because it's federated. So this is like a great way to kind of bust people out of siloed services like YouTube, because I can have my own instance if I wanted to, but I could still see the FSF videos. They could still see mine if I uploaded them. So it's really kind of like, it kind of is a way of translating the community principles of the free software movement into the space of social media. And if you want to find our PeerTube account, the URL is below. Lately, we've been publishing some videos from our anniversary celebration, which we did at the beginning of October. And we're also distributing the animated videos there. So hopefully if you're on PeerTube, you might see it on your timeline in the near future. And remote education and free video conferencing. So, obviously in the pandemic, we're all transitioning to remote methods of work in education. Like Zoe and I are not in Ohio right now. We're in Boston, Massachusetts. So we're, using free software, often we're using non-free software to communicate with people. And so that's not good, because if your work life now depends on non-free software, that's a problem. And if your education is being funneled through non-free software, that's also a problem. And education is one we've particularly targeted recently. We launched a petition against the use of proprietary software in education, particularly remote education. And we're using the information that we collect to approach schools and invite them into a discussion about the importance of software freedom. So if you go to sign the petition, which you can still do, we ask you if you want to provide us with contact information for schools. And if you do that, we'll contact them on your behalf and say, a concerned person says that you require Microsoft Teams, for example, to participate in school. This is a problem because it's proprietary software. Have you considered using Big Blue Button, et cetera? So we would be encouraging people to use those to explore alternatives to the proprietary software that they may be using. And we kind of put our own efforts into this because the FSF tech team has also helped the MIT professor and FSF board member Gerald J. Sussman transition his classes to a fully free setup based on Big Blue Button. If you'll notice, Big Blue Button is the program that we're actually using to record this streams on. So it's actually pretty diverse in what it can do. It can manage classes. It can do all kinds of stuff, really. So our write-up of this can be found on the GNU website at the address below. So we really hope that you'll kind of consider the use of free software tools when it comes to your video conferencing needs. And also, if you're an FSF associate member, we have a fully free Jitsi Meet server that you can use. You just sign in. You can use it to set up a room, and then the other person that you talk to, they don't have to be an FSF member. It's just kind of doing our part, using our technical expertise and our server expertise to give people a free alternative to Zoom calls, for instance, which nobody likes being on. So we're really excited about that, and we're also doing whatever we can to promote free methods of remote education and talking to one another.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to education, Gerald Sussman, he works not only with Big Blue Button, but also with Canvas, which is also free software, and which is a Blackboard system. And particularly for education, I think it's important to note that it is actually possible to have an educational program running on non-proprietary software. So if you are an educational instance or a student anywhere, then take a note of that and make sure that you communicate with your organization or with your educational institution about the software that they make you use.
Yeah, definitely. And this is another case where normalizing the practice will help it kind of catch on. The first few schools to take this step. Often there are places like MIT who are very technical, but the more people we can get into a community of users and school administrators and teachers who are using free software to conduct their remote classes, the more normal it's going to get, and then also the larger the support network is going to get. So even if you have like a very tiny school, even if you're from a very small town, any kind of step in this direction is a good one, because you're not only freeing yourself potentially, but you're also giving freedom to students potentially like all over the world. So it's very important. And each year we also publish a giving guide. So when doing holiday shopping, it's often difficult to find devices, if not impossible to find devices that are freedom respecting. So each year we help people out by publishing our latest recommendations on computer hardware and other gadgets. So these can include mobile phones, for example, laptops, really anything that runs software to a substantial degree. We address it in the giving guide. And so this year's update isn't ready yet, but it will be published in late November. But you can view the 2019 giving guide at that link. And really, it's our recommendations for how best to live a free life when it comes to the hardware that you use. So all the FSF employees will use typically the an X200 ThinkPad with Libra boot, which is mentioned on the giving guide. And yeah, it gives our really what we know, how free things are, and the tools that we can definitely recommend at this point. So check it out if you haven't yet.
Volunteer. We have gone through a bunch of things, of course, that we think that you can do to either help us or other organizations when it comes to carrying your weight in the free software world or in the free software community. It happens a lot that we run into people that just go and come to us and they go, how can I help? What can I do? So I think if you go through this presentation, you can find a lot of different ways that we can help, that we can use your help, whether it is submitting translations for the videos or for the email self-defense guide, or even just installing encryption on your email server, things like that. All of those things help. Now, if you want to become a volunteer and be in our database, our system, for when things come up, then you can email us at campaigns@fsf.org, and then we can submit you into the system there. As every once in a while, there are things that happen where we need extra people, so we can then email you, which we will do, and then. You can also help out with doing advocacy work in your local area. We have, I don't know if I made this clear enough in the beginning, but LibrePlanet is both a network and a conference. And LibrePlanet.org is our network website, and LibrePlanet.org/2021 is our conference website. And on the network website, you can find other community members and teams and groups of people that you can connect with all over the world that can be part of your group of local organizers. We run the LibrePlanet Wiki for exactly this purpose. We want to give people a place and local groups also a place to collaborate and organize actions for themselves. If you do have a group, have an idea for a group, or have an idea for an action within your group, we are always on the other side of campaigns@fsf.org to help you either communicate your message, share your information, or whatever action it is that you are developing, and of course to answer any questions that you might have. We currently are still not allowed to have in-person events, so we don't want to motivate anyone to have in-person events. But once we do, again, the FSF wants to make sure that we can support local organization and activism. And so we will then launch a program to help people get their expenses back for a part or for a whole. It depends a little bit on what you're organizing and how much of it we actually can take on. So we want to just tell everyone to find like-minded people and start local groups and organizations. And if you're interested in knowing more about this, you can email us as well.
Definitely. So one other way that you can support the FSF, and actually the main way you can support the FSF financially, is through an associate membership. It's the bulk of our revenue. It helps us stay independent and focused on our mission. It's very important for us, financially, but it also is a show of support for the free software movement, or at least our work in the free software movement. So we really appreciate, every single associate member that we have. And it also nets you a lot of great benefits, access to our Jitsi Meet server, which I mentioned previously, the member forum, and also we'll send you in the mail a bootable USB card with Triskel GNU Linux pre-installed, so you can either run it from the card or install it to a separate computer. And this is just a few of them. There are actually many other benefits, so many that I forget some of them sometimes. But you can, in any case, you can join or renew your membership at fsf.org/join. Looks like we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes left, so I'm going to go through this last slide pretty quickly. There are a lot of ways to talk to us. We're, I guess, passionate users of IRC. We have a lot of channels. So we have #FSF, #DBD for the Defective by Design campaign, and #Libra Planet, so you can feel free to chat with us there. You can also join the Libra Planet Discuss mailing list, which is a kind of discussion based group that talks about different software freedom issues. We also run a free software friendly jobs page. So if you're an employer, you have a job working on free software, programming free software, or a sysadmin gig, let us know, and we can include it on our directory of employment opportunities. And then if you have any other questions at all, feel free to write to us at campaigns@fsf.org. We check it very, very regularly. So, and we like hearing from people. So, just any question you have, any, thing you'd like to say to us or thing we should focus on, just let us know. And this is going to wrap up our pre-recorded part. But tomorrow in the future, I'm going to call in by phone and answer any questions that people might have in the last few minutes that we have left of our presentation. And thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for hearing about the FSF and free software, and we definitely hope that you'll be getting involved. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Beth, you're muted.
Okay, I apologize. We only have time for one question, and that one question is, where can someone go for more information?
So this is Greg. Best place to go to would pretty much just be fsf.org. But for more about the free software movement in general, you could also go to gnu.org, which is gnu.org.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Greg and Zoe. I really appreciate it. And it's really awesome that we are able to elevate ourselves to caring a lot about the principles of freedom as we have transitioned into the open Libra free. Fantastic. Glad that you could join us. We also had an audience question regarding the slide deck, and I will make that available as soon as I can.